Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and I'm beginning a new build today. This is the Estes SA2061 Sasha. This is a 24 millimeter rocket using up to E's in black powder anyway, and it's a two-stager, which is kind of interesting, claiming that it can go up to 2,300 feet. That would be most impressive. I suspect if you actually put two E's in this, it would be a very impressive flight, but you would never get it back. But hey, I guess you never know. I can't imagine ever flying it on anything that big. I think C to C might be as big as I ever launch out of this, but be that as it may, it looks fun. It is supposed to look like a Russian, I don't know, surface-to-air missile of some sort. It, as far as I can tell, it's not actually a scale replica of anything. It's just inspired by something real. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but be that as it may, this is going to be my next build. It's a decent amount of construction, but fortunately the painting, if you can bring that out a little bit, it looks pretty straightforward. Most of it's this kind of drab military green color. Decent amount of decal work. Plastic parts that need to be painted different colors, so that shouldn't be all that bad. Anyway, let's get started. I've already processed some of the balsa here, but there were 3 sheets. This is the last one. First step, of course, is to put an initial sand on it. So I'm just going to go over this with my block. There's some fiber coming off of this. So this one's a little on the shaggy side. But we're not looking for a particularly good finish here. In fact, it's not going to be finished at all. We're just trying to get the worst of the roughness out of this. There we go. And it's pretty good. I did see there's a little notch here. That wasn't me. It might just be the grain happened to be lining up right there, so I'm going to be careful cutting that out. These are like pretty much everything Estes makes these days. These are laser cuts, so do be somewhat careful with this. They're already starting to come out, which is nice. You know, you don't have to do a whole lot of cutting. The likelihood that you damage anything cutting it out, or you get uneven pieces because you cut them inaccurately, is pretty low. But the downside is that they do come out very, very easily, and perhaps maybe not when you were expecting it. Do make sure you sand both sides. This side is a little rougher than the first side, it looks like. Oh, this might take a little bit longer. Some of these pieces, the first piece of balsa that I processed for this kit, it was very strange. It was dark to about here, and then it was light on the other side. So it was very, very oddly colored. Naturally, of course, that shouldn't make much of a difference because it's all going to get painted over. But the balsa tree, I guess, had an interesting life, that it was so radically different colored. Alright, just about done here. Alright, let's see how this is. I can see, yeah, this is still pretty rough over here, so that's going to need another pass. The second piece of balsa for this was really quite smooth, so it didn't really require much work at all. But let's see. Yeah, that's better. Let's see how it is. Yeah, that's not great either. Over here, another pass basically on this whole side, I guess. Alright, that should do. Yeah, whenever you're doing this, just feel it. If it feels rough, like, yeah, it's a little rough there, go over it again. sawdust, though, when you do this, does tend to like clog up the grain, so dust it off, you know, hence the blowing, because if the grain is being clogged by sawdust, you're not going to get a particularly accurate impression of what's actually going on. Alright, so that's alright. Let's remove it. So I'm just going to be very gently tracing with my knife along these edges. Actually, you know what? Let's flip it over. One of the sides is the side that the laser actually cut, and that tends to be easier to see. And I'm not really looking to cut, to trace the whole thing. I'm really looking for the burrs that are the bits that the laser did not cut. So I really only need to run the blade through them in order to dislodge things. So I think this top part is pretty thoroughly cut at this point. The burrs that go with the grain, a lot of them tend to pop just by handling it, or they've already popped in the package. There we go. There's one I heard on that side. The ones that are diagonal or against the grain, they generally need to be cut, like this one. Just when you're doing this, cut away from your hand, of course, but also try to cut away from the wood. This one isn't much of a problem for the wood part. Because of the way it's been cut into the wood, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Alright. Now this is the diagonal bits here, I'm going to cut through both sides. Now that part's free. I just heard that pop on both sides. Yeah, that seems... Alright, that's out. Yeah, we'll come back to that shortly. Take your time. If it takes more than one pass, that's not a problem. That needs to be cut on the other side, I think. The last thing you want to do is cut into the fin by accident because you are not being patient. So take your time. Actually, that's not the worst thing that you want that could happen. Of course, the worst thing is you could cut into your hand because you are being impatient. So definitely don't do that. Alright, so this is dislodged. I need to be careful about this because the whole thing is liable to slip here. So we're going to be extra careful with that. Alright, there we go. Get the scrap out of the way. Great. And then let's see if I can find exactly where the burrs are. There's one here, and I think the other one's cut. So I'm just going to cut through the burrs. There we go. Same deal here. I actually don't see them on that side. Let's check this side. There's one right there. And there's one right there. That's it. Great. Alright, so I'm not going to fully process these right now. What I am going to do though is I'm going to grab a big piece of sandpaper and I'm going to take the burrs off. So I'm going to stack all the fins together and then do this, and it should end up taking the burrs off each face. Remember, this is darker because it's been cut with the laser, so if you've sanded it and it's down to this color instead, great. Really just looking to take the burrs off, and if there's any like inconsistency in the fin, there really shouldn't be, this would handle that. And then this face as well. The middle ones are not quite sanded yet, so a little bit more. I'm going to actually change the order here. That might make a difference. There. Alright. There is some more work to do with those, but for the time being I'll put them away. Here are the other main fins. They need to be sanded as well, so we'll come back to them. There's some other pieces here as well. All this stuff is going to have to get the burrs taken off of it, but you don't need to watch that. That'll happen later. The other thing I want to do in this video is nose cone. Yeah, so the nose cone has, well, it's not just the nose cone, it's the end part as well. It's the engine bell. So I do need to take this apart. Whoops, there goes the scrap balsa. Oh well, didn't need it anyway. This requires some cutting. So my blade and my hobby knife, I actually replaced it just before starting this. I'm going to don my protective glove here on my left hand, my non-cutting hand. And I'm going to use that to protect myself just in case anything particularly stupid happens to go down here. So I need to make, well, 3 cuts. I'm going to cut this part off, I'm going to cut right here, and then I need to separate right there. So I'm just going to start tracing this with the knife. I'm not really trying to cut through it in the first pass. I'm just tracing where I want the cut to go. It's going to take a few passes probably before I actually cut, make it into the plastic, but that's fine, like I am right now. Take your time. There's nothing to be gained by doing this quickly, and there is plenty to be lost. Yeah, so be careful with that. When the blade gets stuck, that's when bad things could potentially happen. So if you feel the blade getting a lot of resistance, then take it easy. Yeah. So when it cuts nicely, there's like no resistance. If it's cutting but there's a lot of resistance, then you really should be taking another pass at it. I've got a lot of this cut through at this point, but not the whole thing, so let's see what we've got. Start to pry it apart and see where you cut and where you haven't. There is a seam in these because of the way it's created, and it's usually thicker plastic, so I'm just going to take a couple passes right here at this seam. Yeah. It does seem to be the only part that's really still intact at this point, which is fine. Now, working with balsa, you don't want to do this, right? You don't want to try to force the bits apart. The plastic, though, it doesn't tend to hurt if you use a little bit of force to pry it apart, because it's either that or the knife. Just about through here. I think what I'm going to do is get the knife a little bit farther in. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to take a couple passes. It's just about cut through. There we go. Alright. So I've got it like 95% off. I'm just going to carefully peel it back. It should pop off. There. Garbage. Just taking a quick look, I don't see anything that's particularly egregious about this, like parts I missed or didn't cut evenly, so I'm going to let that go. Do another cut here. This is going to detach the engine bell. Again, same deal. I'm into the plastic now. So a couple passes usually. This is actually, it seems to be very thin here for whatever reason. Because I only took This is the second pass. And it was cutting through quite nicely. It's just about done. Okay. There we go. Now this part goes inside the rocket, so I would trim this with the hobby knife, but I'm not going to really bother with it because this part's not going to be seen. It's not going to affect anything. I'll sand it down shortly, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Now the last bit, the round part here, well, the part that balloons back out, I guess you could just call it, that needs to come off. Now this is a fairly fine cut because look right here. This is the end of the hook where the shock cord and things get connected. There's not much space in there, so I want to be really careful that I'm not cutting too far in this time. I mean, I'm usually trying to be careful, but this is a pretty small margin of error here. And I have a feeling that this is pretty thick plastic here because the places in these plastic bits that Estes makes that are narrow tend to be thicker, probably because of the manufacturing process, but anyway, let's just be careful with that. Yeah, but that is awfully close, so I want to be very careful about that. I have used a rotary device, a rotary tool to cut these in the past. I definitely would not want to be doing this on this bit in particular. Maybe the other parts, but not this, because the cutting blade, I think, is too wide to fit into this narrow little bit. So the last thing I would want is to, end up cutting off the eyelet. If you cut off the eyelet, well, you're not going to be able to connect the shock cord or the parachute, and that of course would make the whole affair, well, you'd have to rebuild it or find some other way to connect it, and that would stink. You don't want to do that. Now this is the thickest bit of plastic that I'm cutting through today, and I'm making progress, but it's not quick, and that's fine so long as you are patient with it. But again, this is all the more reason why you should probably invest in one of these protective gloves, just in case you get a little impatient. Yeah. And if you're looking to see what happens if you get a little impatient, then you should go look into my post history and find my build of the Estes Dark 1, where I was not patient enough, and let's just say I had already met my deductible for the year, and if I hadn't, that probably would have made a pretty sizable dent into my deductible. Alright, let's see how we're doing here. Yeah, this is, just looking at it this way, I can see that it's very thick plastic, so this is going to take a while. I'm going to give it another couple minutes of live, recorded coverage. If I don't get through it here in another couple passes, I'll do this off camera, because it's not, watching me just hold a blade against a piece of plastic and turn it, it's probably not all that exciting. But seriously, take your time with this. I don't think I'm really all that close to being through it at the moment. But again, that's okay. It's a time-consuming process. But better safe than sorry. I'm getting pretty close, I think. That cut looks pretty deep at this point. It's a lot of plastic to go through, unfortunately, though. Alright, I will do the rest of this off camera. The last thing I want to do, though, is, I'll deal with that later. Let's get my sandpaper back out. This is a little ragged, and this part is exterior, so I want both of these safe to handle, and at least I want this part to look good. So this generally makes a pretty awful noise. Sorry in advance. Yep, better. And oh yeah, there's that squeakiness. Woo, that's annoying. All right. Yeah, that's better. All right, lovely. That is done. This will get done a little bit more, and I have fins to shape. You don't need to watch the rest of that. So we'll pick this up, hopefully with motor mount construction in the next video. So I'll see you then.